They said the old routes were cursed. That some roads in the Sahara remember things, remember the men who never returned. I thought they were just stories. Until the night I saw the lights. I've traveled to many places in my life. Some beautiful, some dangerous. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I would find on the ghost roads of the Sahara. This is not a story about tourism. It's not about adventure in the way you think. This is about something older. Something that waits in the silence between the dunes. Something that doesn't forget. And something that, once it finds you, never really lets you go. It started with a map. An old one. Faded and torn at the edges, the kind of thing you'd find in a dusty archive or tucked into the back of a forgotten drawer. It was handed to me by a guide in a small town on the edge of the Moroccan desert. A place where the modern world seemed to stop, where the buildings were the color of sand and the air smelled like dust and spice and time itself. The guide's name was Yusuf. He was a lean man, weathered by decades under the sun, his skin dark and creased like leather. His eyes were sharp, cautious. The kind of eyes that had seen things he didn't talk about. He unfolded the map on a wooden table between us, tracing a thin, barely visible line with his finger. "You want to cross the old caravan route?" he asked. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "The route that traders used centuries ago. The ones who carried salt and gold and spices across the desert. The ones who never made it back." I nodded. I told him I wanted to experience it, to see what those ancient travelers saw, to feel what they felt, to understand what it meant to cross one of the most unforgiving landscapes on earth. But Yusuf didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just looked at me with that unreadable expression, and then he said something I would remember for the rest of my life. "It's not the heat you should fear. It's the lights. The ones that move. The ones that lead you nowhere." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. I thought it was just folklore. Desert legends meant to scare tourists. Stories passed down through generations to keep people from wandering too far. But Yusuf's face was serious. Dead serious. "Don't follow the lights," he repeated. And then he folded the map and handed it to me. We left the next morning just before dawn. The air was cool, almost cold, and the sky was still bruised with darkness. The stars were fading, and in the east, the first pale light of day was beginning to spread across the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, an ocean of sand painted in shades of amber and rust and gold. It was beautiful, hauntingly beautiful. But there was something else there too. Something beneath the beauty. A silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind. The kind that makes you feel small. The kind that makes you feel watched. Yusuf drove in silence. His hands gripped the wheel with a kind of grim determination, his eyes scanning the horizon like a man expecting something. Waiting for something. I tried to make conversation, but he barely responded. Just short answers. Single words. His mind was somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't reach. For hours we drove. The sun climbed higher and the temperature began to rise. Slowly at first, then quickly, then relentlessly. By mid-morning the heat was oppressive. Thick and suffocating, pressing down on us like a physical weight. I drank water constantly, but it never seemed enough. My lips cracked. My skin burned. The air shimmered with heat waves, making the horizon ripple and dance like a mirage. The landscape didn't change. Just dunes. Endless rolling dunes. And between them, the faint trace of a road, not paved, not marked, just a memory carved into the earth by 1,000 caravans over 1,000 years. By midday, the silence had become almost unbearable. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Like the desert was listening. Waiting. I tried to distract myself. I looked at the map. I took notes. I tried to appreciate the beauty of the place. But the silence pressed in. And the heat. And the vastness. It was like being swallowed. Like being erased. And then, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, something changed. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, suddenly. Like we had crossed some invisible threshold. Like we had passed through a door we couldn't see. And the silence deepened. It became something else. Something unnatural. Something aware. That's when I saw them. The lights. At first I thought they were headlights. Another vehicle, maybe, traveling in the distance. But Yusuf stopped the car immediately. His body went rigid. Tense. His hands tightened on the wheel. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just stared at the horizon, where 3 pale lights flickered and pulsed, moving slowly from left to right. They were distant, maybe a mile away, but they were unmistakable. And they shouldn't have been there. There were no roads. No towns. No reason for lights to exist in this place. What are those? I asked again. Yusuf's jaw tightened. His eyes didn't leave the lights. And then he said a word that made my blood run cold. Eltawa. The word hung in the air like smoke. Like a curse. It's a spirit, he said quietly. It lives in the desert. Makes people lost. It shows you lights. Lights that look like help, like safety, like salvation, and it leads you away. Into the sand. Into the emptiness. Until you die. I stared at him, unsure if he was serious. But his face was stone. There was no hint of humor. No trace of doubt. He believed it. Completely. Don't follow the lights, he repeated. And then he started the engine again and drove in the opposite direction. We set up camp that night in the shadow of a massive dune. Yusuf built a small fire, though the air was already cold enough to see your breath. The temperature had plummeted with the setting sun, and the desert had transformed. The warmth was gone. Replaced by a biting, bone-deep cold that seeped into everything. Yusuf didn't speak much. He just sat, staring into the flames, his hands clasped together like he was praying. I wanted to ask him more about the lights. About Eltawa. About what he believed. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the look in his eyes. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the feeling that we were being watched. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Mirages. Reflections. Heat distortion. The mind playing tricks in an empty place. But deep down I knew. Something was out there. Something was watching. And it knew we were there. And then I heard it. A sound. Low and distant, almost like a hum. It came from the dunes, rising and falling like a breath. Like a voice. Like the desert itself was singing. I looked at Yusuf. What is that? He didn't look up. The sand, he said. When it moves, it sings. Some say it's the wind. Others say it's the voices of the dead, the ones who never made it across. The sound continued. A deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the ground, through the air, through my bones. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. And it felt intentional. Like it was trying to tell me something. Like it was calling. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those lights. And when I opened them, I felt like something was just beyond the fire's reach, standing in the darkness, waiting. Watching. Breathing. If you've ever felt that same silence, that weight pressing down on you in the dark, type the word silence below. And if you want to follow me deeper into this story, into the places most people never go, consider subscribing. Because what happened next, what I'm about to tell you, is only the beginning. The next morning the GPS was useless. No signal. No satellites. Just static. Yusuf seemed unfazed. He navigated by landmarks, a distant rock formation, the angle of the sun, the shape of the dunes. But even he seemed uncertain. The road, if you could call it that, had disappeared. There were no tire tracks. No markers. No signs that anyone had ever passed this way. Just sand. Endless shifting sand. And the feeling that we were going in circles. By midday we came across ruins. The remains of an old structure, half buried in the dunes. It might have been a caravanserai once. A rest stop for traders traveling the ancient routes. A place where men and camels could shelter from the sun and the wind. Where water could be found. Where stories could be shared. But now it was just bones. Stone walls worn smooth by wind and time, covered in strange symbols I didn't recognize. Spirals. Triangles. Lines that seemed to form words in a language I didn't understand. Yusuf knelt beside them, his fingers tracing the carvings with a kind of reverence. This place is old, he said. Very old. People died here. Many people. Not from thirst. Not from the heat. From something else. I felt it then. A heaviness. A presence. It was like the air itself had thickened, pressing against my skin, against my lungs. It was hard to breathe. Hard to think. I looked around, expecting to see someone, something, but there was nothing. Just the ruins. Just the wind. And that low, humming sound, rising from the sand like a voice calling from deep underground. We should go, Yusuf said suddenly. He stood and walked quickly back to the vehicle, his movements sharp and urgent. I followed, glancing back over my shoulder. And for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw something move among the ruins. A shadow. Tall and thin. Like a person but not quite. But when I blinked it was gone. That night the dunes sang again. Louder this time. A deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the ground, through the air, through my bones. It wasn't just wind. It was something else. Something intentional. Something alive. Yusuf sat by the fire, his eyes closed, his lips moving in silent prayer. I asked him what he was praying for. He opened his eyes and looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. For us to leave, he said. Before it's too late. I woke up in the middle of the night. The fire had died to embers and the cold had seeped into everything. My breath fogged in the frigid air. And I felt it again, that presence, that weight. Like something was standing just outside the light watching me. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. And then I saw them. Footprints. In the sand. Leading away from our camp. They weren't ours. They were too large. Too deliberate. And they stopped just a few feet from my sleeping bag as if something had been standing there watching me while I slept. On the third day we tried to turn back. But the desert had changed. The dunes didn't look the same. The landmarks Yusuf had memorized were gone, swallowed by the shifting sands. We were lost. Truly lost. And for the first time I saw fear in Yusuf's eyes. Real fear. This is wrong, he muttered. The desert doesn't do this. Not like this. We drove for hours, circling, backtracking, trying to find the way out. But nothing looked familiar. Every dune looked the same. Every direction felt wrong. And then we saw them again. The lights. This time they weren't distant. They were close. 3 pale orbs hovering just above the dunes, moving slowly toward us. Yusuf's hands shook on the wheel. Do not look at them, he said. Do not follow them. But they followed us. Everywhere we turned, they were there. Pulsing. Flickering. Drawing closer. And then, as the sun began to set, I saw something in the rearview mirror. A figure. Tall and thin, moving across the sand with an unnatural gait. It wasn't running. It wasn't walking. It was gliding. Floating. And it was following us. Drive, I said. Drive faster. Yusuf floored the accelerator, the vehicle lurching forward, tires spinning in the sand. But the figure kept pace. And the lights kept coming. I could hear the hum again, louder now, almost deafening. It filled the car. It filled my head. It was everywhere. And then, suddenly, we broke through. The sand gave way to rock, and ahead, impossibly, was a paved road. Yusuf didn't slow down. He drove like a man possessed, his eyes wide, his breath ragged. We didn't stop until we reached a town, miles away, where the lights and the sounds and the presence finally faded into memory. Yusuf left without a word. I never saw him again. If this story has gripped you so far, if you feel that tension, that dread, consider subscribing. Because the journey isn't over. What I brought back with me from the Sahara, it's still here. And the real story is only beginning. I thought it was over. I thought I had escaped. But some things don't let you go. Some things follow you home. The first night back in civilization, I slept in a hotel. A clean bed. Air conditioning. Running water. Everything the desert wasn't. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. That hum. That deep, resonant sound from the dunes. And when I looked out the window, I saw a light. Just one. Flickering in the distance. I told myself it was a street lamp. A car. Anything rational. But I knew. I started researching. Compulsively. Obsessively. I read everything I could find about Eltawa, the desert spirit that leads travelers astray. About the singing dunes. About the ghost roads of the Sahara. I found stories. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Travelers who vanished without a trace. Caravans that never arrived at their destination. Men who swore they were followed by lights, by shadows, by something they couldn't name. Something that wouldn't stop. And I found something else. A pattern. A warning, buried in ancient texts and oral traditions passed down through generations of desert people. The desert remembers. It holds on to things. It collects them. And if you cross it without permission, without respect, without understanding what you're doing, it takes something from you. Or it gives you something. Something you can never get rid of. Something that becomes a part of you. A shadow that will never leave. I moved cities. Changed apartments. Tried to start over. But it didn't matter. Wherever I went, I felt it. That presence. That weight. I would wake up in the middle of the night and find footprints in the dust on my floor. Footprints that weren't mine. I would hear that hum, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere I couldn't locate. Somewhere inside the walls. Inside my head. And the lights. God, the lights. They appeared outside my windows. In parking lots. In empty fields. Always at night. Always watching. Always waiting. I went to doctors. Therapists. Sleep specialists. I tried medication. Meditation. Therapy. I tried everything. But how do you explain something like this? How do you tell someone that you're being followed by something from the Sahara? They would think I'm insane. They would smile politely and write prescriptions and suggest I get more rest. Maybe I am insane. Maybe this is what madness feels like. But insanity doesn't leave footprints. Insanity doesn't make the lights appear in places they shouldn't be. Insanity doesn't make you feel like you're being watched every second of every day. So I learned to live with it. I stopped closing the curtains at night. I stopped trying to rationalize it. I stopped trying to make it go away. Because the truth is, I know what happened. I crossed a line. I went somewhere I wasn't supposed to go. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. I disturbed something that should have been left alone. And now it's a part of me. A shadow that will never leave. A presence that will always be there, just beyond the edge of my vision, waiting. Sometimes late at night, I sit by the window and watch the lights. And I think about Yusuf. About his warnings. About the desert and its secrets. About the roads that remember. And I wonder, if I went back, would it let me go? Would it release me? Or would it finally take what it's been waiting for all this time? I don't know the answer. And I'm not sure I want to find out. Because part of me knows. Part of me understands. The desert doesn't let go. It never has. It never will. And some roads, once you travel them, stay with you forever. Even when you're thousands of miles away. Even when you're safe. Even when you're home. So what do you think? Would you take that journey knowing what I know now? Would you cross those ghost roads even if something might follow you home? Would you risk it just to see what's out there beyond the maps and the guidebooks and the safe, familiar world? Share your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something you can't quite name, subscribe to join me on the next one. Because there are more stories. More places where the line between our world and something else grows thin. More roads that remember. And I'll be there walking that line, seeking the truth so you don't have to. Until then, stay curious, stay brave, and never stop seeking the truth. Even if the truth is something you can't ever escape.